In the small and quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow pace. The days were predictable, filled with the same routines that had been followed for generations. Fields stretched out as far as the eye could see, golden waves of wheat swaying gently in the breeze. Farmers worked tirelessly under the sun, their hands calloused from years of labor. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where gossip traveled faster than the wind, and where change came slowly, if it came at all. William Carter, or Bill as most people called him, was one of those farmers. He owned a large piece of land just outside of town, acres upon acres of fertile soil that produced some of the best crops in the region. His farm was prosperous, his barns always full, and his bank account healthy. To anyone looking in from the outside, Bill seemed to have it all. But if you looked closer, you'd notice the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. Bill was a man in his late 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with weathered skin and deep lines etched into his face from years spent working outdoors. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, but his blue eyes still held a spark of warmth. Despite his success, there was an emptiness in his life that no amount of money or hard work could fill. Years ago, he had lost his wife to illness, leaving him alone with only his memories and his fields for company. Their children had grown up and moved away, building lives of their own in distant cities. Now Bill's days were long and quiet, filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and chirping birds rather than laughter and conversation. On this particular evening, Bill found himself sitting at a corner table in the local diner, sipping coffee, and flipping through an old magazine someone had left behind. The diner wasn't busy, just a few regulars chatting quietly over plates of pie and cups of tea. Outside, the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was peaceful, but peace didn't chase away the ache in Bill's chest. As he turned the pages absent-mindedly, something caught his eye. An advertisement, tucked between articles about farming equipment and recipes for apple pie. The headline read, "Looking for love? Find your perfect match today." Below it was a short description of a service that connected lonely men with women seeking new opportunities through mail-order brides. At first, Bill chuckled to himself. The idea seemed almost absurd, a relic of another time. Who would sign up for such a thing these days? But as he sat there, staring at the page, curiosity began to creep in. He thought about how lonely his evenings had become, how silent his house felt when the workday ended. Maybe it wasn't such a crazy idea after all. After all, what did he have to lose? If nothing else, it might be nice to have someone to share meals with, someone to talk to about the little things in life. With a sigh, Bill tore out the advertisement and slipped it into his pocket. He paid for his coffee and headed home, the wheels in his mind turning. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't stop thinking about the possibility. Could he really find someone who would want to build a life with him, here in Willow Creek? Someone who wouldn't mind the isolation, the hard work, the simplicity of rural living? While Bill wrestled with these thoughts, hundreds of miles away in the bustling city of Chicago, a young woman named Lila Monroe was facing challenges of her own. Lila was in her late 20s, with warm brown skin and dark curls that framed her face. Her eyes, though tired, held a glimmer of hope, a determination to rise above the struggles she faced every day. Life hadn't been easy for Lila. Born to a mother of African descent and a father of Irish heritage, she had grown up navigating two worlds that often clashed. In school, she was teased for being different, for not fitting neatly into one category or the other. As an adult, she faced discrimination in the workplace and struggled to make ends meet. Jobs were scarce, and landlords turned her away when they saw her name on rental applications. Still, Lila refused to give up. She dreamed of finding a place where she could belong, where she could start fresh without judgment. One afternoon, while sorting through a pile of junk mail, Lila stumbled upon the same advertisement Bill had seen earlier that day. At first, she dismissed it as nonsense, tossing it aside with the rest of the flyers and coupons. But later that evening, as she sat alone in her tiny apartment, the weight of her circumstances pressing down on her, she picked it up again. What harm could it do to try, she wondered. Maybe, just maybe, this could be her chance to escape the cycle of hardship and find the stability she craved. Fueled by a mix of desperation and hope, Lila grabbed a pen and began filling out the application. She wrote honestly about her background, her dreams, and her desire for a better life. She described herself as resilient, kind-hearted, and eager to learn. When she reached the section asking for a photograph, she hesitated. Would her appearance deter potential matches? Would they reject her outright because of the color of her skin? For a moment, doubt threatened to overwhelm her. But then she reminded herself why she was doing this, to take control of her destiny, no matter the odds. With trembling hands, Lila attached a picture of herself smiling brightly against a backdrop of autumn leaves. She sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mailbox the next morning, praying that someone, somewhere, would see past her exterior and recognize the person she truly was. Days turned into weeks, and Lila waited anxiously for a response. Each trip to the mailbox brought a mix of excitement and dread. Finally, the letters began arriving. One by one, polite rejections piling up on her kitchen counter. Some cited logistical reasons. Others offered vague excuses. But one letter stood out, its words cutting deeper than the rest. "We regret to inform you," it began, before blunt past that point. It went on to explain that the recipient preferred a bride more suited to their community. Though the phrasing was diplomatic, the implication was clear. Lila's heart sank as she read the sentence, over and over, anger and sadness bubbling inside her. She had known rejection before, but this felt personal, raw. It was a reminder of the barriers she faced simply because of who she was. Despite the sting of rejection, Lila refused to let it break her spirit. She continued sending out applications, holding on to the belief that somewhere someone would look beyond appearances and see the qualities that truly mattered. And unbeknownst to her, one of those applications would soon land in the hands of William Carter, a man who was beginning to realize that love doesn't always come wrapped in familiar packaging. Back in Willow Creek, Bill sifted through the stack of profiles he had received. There were dozens of them, each accompanied by photographs and heartfelt letters. Some candidates seemed perfect on paper, young, beautiful, eager to please. Others were less polished but exuded sincerity. As Bill flipped through the pages, one profile caught his attention. It belonged to Lila Monroe. At first glance, he hesitated. Her darker complexion made him pause, not because he harbored prejudice, but because he worried about how their relationship might be perceived in a town like Willow Creek. Small-mindedness was a disease that spread quickly in close-knit communities, and Bill knew he'd face scrutiny if he chose someone who didn't fit the mold. Yet something about Lila's words resonated with him. Her description of resilience and kindness spoke volumes, painting a picture of a woman who had endured hardship yet remained hopeful. It was a quality he admired deeply. For days, Bill debated whether to respond. He weighed the pros and cons, imagining the challenges they might face together. Ultimately, he decided to take a chance. He penned a letter to Lila, expressing genuine interest while acknowledging the potential difficulties ahead. "I won't lie," he wrote. "There may be obstacles. People here aren't always open-minded, but I believe we can overcome them. Together." When Lila received Bill's letter, she read it several times, tears welling in her eyes. Here was a man who didn't shy away from reality, who acknowledged the world's flaws but still chose to extend a hand. His honesty touched her, and she responded warmly, thanking him for his candor and sharing more about her hopes for the future. Thus began a correspondence that would change both their lives forever. As summer gave way to fall, Bill and Lila exchanged letters regularly, learning about each other's passions, fears, and dreams. Through their words, they built a connection that transcended distance and circumstance. For the first time in years, Bill felt a flicker of excitement about the future. And for Lila, the prospect of starting anew in a place where she might finally belong filled her with cautious optimism. Lila sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the stack of letters in front of her. Each envelope bore a different return address, but they all carried the same message: rejection. Some were polite, offering vague explanations like not a good fit or logistical challenges. Others were blunt, making it clear that her skin color was the real issue. One letter even went so far as to say, "We're looking for someone who will blend well with our community." The words stung, cutting deeper than any insult she had faced before. But Lila refused to let bitterness take root. She reminded herself why she had started this journey: to find a better life, one where she could be valued for who she was rather than judged for how she looked. Still, the rejections weighed heavily on her. Nights were the hardest. Alone in her tiny apartment, she would replay the words in her mind, wondering if she would ever find someone willing to see beyond her appearance. One evening, as she sorted through yet another batch of mail, an envelope caught her eye. It was plain and unassuming, but something about it felt different. Her heart raced as she opened it carefully, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The letter began simply, "Dear Miss Monroe." As she read, her eyes widened in surprise. This wasn't like the others. The writer, William Carter, or Bill, as he signed off, was honest and straightforward. He admitted that their pairing might raise eyebrows in his small town, but he didn't shy away from the truth. Instead, he expressed admiration for her resilience and kindness, qualities he believed were more important than appearances. He promised to stand by her side, no matter what challenges they might face. For the first time in weeks, Lila smiled. Here was a man who didn't sugarcoat reality, but still chose to reach out. His words gave her hope, a reminder that not everyone saw the world in black and white, or in this case, shades of prejudice. She reread the letter several times, savoring each sentence. Then, grabbing a pen and paper, she began to write her response. Meanwhile, in Willow Creek, Bill found himself pacing the length of his farmhouse living room. He had sent the letter to Lila days ago, but now doubt crept into his mind. Had he been too blunt? Would she think he was trying to scare her off? The thought of rejection gnawed at him, though he tried to push it aside. After all, he reasoned, honesty was better than false promises. Bill had always prided himself on being a practical man. He didn't indulge in fantasies or daydreams. He dealt with facts and realities. But there was something about Lila's profile that made him pause. Her description of overcoming adversity resonated deeply with him. He admired her strength, her determination to rise above circumstances that would have broken many others. And yet, he couldn't ignore the whispers of doubt, echoing in his mind. What would the townspeople say? How would they react to a bride who didn't look like them, who came from a world so different from theirs? Bill knew Willow Creek well enough to predict the gossip, the sideways glances, the thinly veiled disapproval. He also knew that some of his neighbors wouldn't hesitate to voice their opinions loudly and openly. Harold Grayson, for instance, was notorious for stirring trouble. The last thing Bill needed was Harold meddling in his personal life. Still, as much as he worried about what others might think, he couldn't shake the feeling that Lila was special. There was a sincerity in her words that drew him in, a quiet confidence that suggested she wasn't afraid to face challenges head-on. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what he needed to bring warmth back into his home. Days passed, and finally, a reply arrived. Bill tore open the envelope eagerly, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded the letter. Lila's response was warm and thoughtful. She thanked him for his honesty and shared more about her life in Chicago, her struggles, her dreams, and her desire for a fresh start. Reading her words, Bill felt a sense of connection that surprised him. It was as if they had known each other for years, not mere weeks. Encouraged by her response, Bill wrote back, sharing stories of his own life in Willow Creek. He described the rolling fields, the crisp autumn air, and the peacefulness of rural living. He told her about his late wife, Sarah, and how much he missed having someone to share his days with. He spoke of his children, now grown and living far away, and how empty the house felt without their laughter. With each letter, their bond grew, stronger, built on mutual understanding and shared hopes for the future. As the correspondence continued, Lila began to picture life in Willow Creek. She imagined waking up to the sound of birdsong, walking through golden fields of wheat, and sharing meals with Bill at a cozy wooden table. The image was comforting, a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of city life. Yet, alongside the excitement, anxiety lingered. What if the townspeople rejected her outright? What if Bill's promise to protect her from judgment wasn't enough? Lila confided in her best friend Rosa during one of their weekly phone calls. Rosa listened patiently as Lila poured out her fears and hopes. "You've got to trust your gut," Rosa said firmly. "If this guy is willing to stick by you, then maybe it's worth taking the risk. Besides, you deserve a chance at happiness." Her words stayed with Lila long after the call ended. Rosa was right, she deserved happiness just like anyone else. And if Bill truly believed in her, perhaps that was enough to overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead. Back in Willow Creek, Bill faced challenges of his own. Word had spread quickly that he was considering a mail-order bride, and not everyone was supportive. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson, the nosy shopkeeper, cornered him near the produce aisle. "Heard you're thinking of bringing a city girl here," she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Hope you know what you're getting into." Bill forced a smile, though his jaw tightened. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he replied evenly. "And I'd appreciate it if folks minded their own business." Mrs. Henderson huffed, but didn't press further. Bill paid for his groceries and left, frustration simmering beneath the surface. He hated the idea of people meddling in his personal life, but he knew this was only the beginning. If he brought Lila to Willow Creek, the scrutiny would intensify. Could he handle it? More importantly, could she? Despite the doubts swirling around him, Bill remained resolute. Every letter from Lila reinforced his decision. Her words were filled with courage and optimism, qualities he admired deeply. He realized that together, they could face whatever challenges came their way. One afternoon, as he worked in the fields, Bill made a decision. He would invite Lila to visit Willow Creek, not just to meet him, but to see if she could envision a future there. He sat down at his desk that evening and penned the invitation, his pen moving steadily across the page. "Come see the farm," he wrote. "See if it feels like home. No pressure, just an opportunity to explore something new." When the letter arrived, Lila read it over and over, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. She could either stay in Chicago, stuck in the same cycle of struggle and rejection, or she could take a leap of faith and step into the unknown. After hours of deliberation, she packed her bags and wrote back, accepting his invitation. The days leading up to her departure were a blur of preparation and nerves. Lila double-checked her suitcase, making sure she had everything she might need. She rehearsed conversations in her head, imagining how she would introduce herself to Bill and the townspeople. Most of all, she prayed that she was making the right choice. On the morning of her departure, Lila stood on the platform at Union Station, clutching her ticket tightly. The train whistle blew, signaling the start of her journey. As the locomotive pulled away from the station, she gazed out the window, watching the city fade into the distance. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile but powerful belief that things could get better. Hours later, as the train rolled into Willow Creek, Lila's stomach churned with nervous anticipation. She stepped onto the platform, her eyes scanning the crowd for a familiar face. Then she saw him, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind blue eyes and a reassuring smile. Bill held up a hand in greeting, and Lila felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Welcome to Willow Creek," he said warmly, extending his hand. Lila shook, noticing the calluses on his palm, a testament to years of hard work. "I'm glad you're here." "I'm glad to be here," she replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. As they walked toward Bill's truck, Lila couldn't help but notice the stares. Some were curious, others disapproving. She kept her head high, refusing to let their judgment break her spirit. Bill noticed too, his jaw tightening slightly, but he said nothing, focusing instead on making her feel welcome. The drive to the farm was quiet. the tension between them palpable. Both were unsure of what to say, aware that this meeting marked the beginning of something neither fully understood. Yet despite the uncertainty, there was a spark of possibility, a sense that they might just be exactly what the other needed. When they arrived at the farm, Lila stepped out of the truck and took a deep breath. The air smelled of earth and grass, fresh and invigorating. She looked around, taking in the vast fields, the red barn, and the cozy farmhouse nestled among trees. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of peace. "This is beautiful," she said softly, turning to Bill with a tentative smile. The first few days at the farm were a whirlwind of emotions for Lila. Everything was so different from the cramped apartment she had left behind in Chicago. The air smelled clean and fresh, filled with the scent of earth and growing things. The fields stretched endlessly, golden waves of wheat swaying gently in the breeze. Even the sounds were unfamiliar. The chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hum of insects buzzing in the tall grass. It was peaceful, almost magical, but also overwhelming. Bill did his best to make her feel comfortable. He showed her around the property, explaining how the farm worked and introducing her to the animals. There were chickens clucking in their coop, cows grazing lazily in the pasture, and a stubborn old mule named Charlie who seemed determined to ignore everyone. Lila listened intently, asking questions whenever she didn't understand something. She wanted to learn, to prove that she could adapt to this new life. But it wasn't just the farm that required adjustment. The people of Willow Creek watched her closely, their curiosity evident in every glance and whispered comment. Some smiled politely when they passed her on the street, while others turned away as if avoiding eye contact would erase her presence altogether. Lila tried not to let it bother her, but it was hard. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, even when no words were spoken. One morning, as she helped Bill gather eggs from the chicken coop, she finally voiced her fears. "Do you think they'll ever accept me?" she asked softly, brushing straw off her hands. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. Bill paused, setting down the basket of eggs he had been carrying. He looked at her, his blue eyes steady and kind. "It won't be easy," he admitted. "Some folks here aren't used to change, but I believe they'll come around. If not for you, then for the good you bring to this place." Lila nodded, though doubt still lingered in her mind. "And what if they don't?" "Then we'll deal with it together," Bill said firmly. "You're not alone in this, Lila. I promised to stand by you, and I meant it." His words gave her strength, a reminder that she wasn't facing this challenge on her own. Still, the road ahead felt uncertain, like walking through fog without knowing where the path led. As the days turned into weeks, Lila threw herself into learning about the farm. She woke early each morning, eager to help with whatever tasks needed doing. At first, Bill hesitated to give her too much responsibility, worried that she might find the work too hard or tedious. But Lila insisted, determined to pull her weight. She quickly proved herself capable, whether it was feeding the animals, planting seeds, or helping harvest crops. Her hands grew calloused, her muscles sore, but she didn't complain. Instead, she found satisfaction in seeing the fruits of her labor, literally. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch after a long day's work, Bill turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You've got a knack for this," he said, gesturing toward the fields. "I can tell you love it." Lila smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I do," she admitted. "There's something about working with your hands, watching things grow. It feels real, you know? Like I'm part of something bigger than myself." Bill nodded, his gaze softening. "That's how I've always felt about farming. It's honest work, even if it's tough sometimes." He paused, then added, "You've brought a lot of energy to this place, Lila. More than I expected." She blushed at the compliment, looking down at her hands. "I just want to make sure I earn my keep," she said quietly. "I don't want anyone thinking I'm here for the wrong reasons." "You've already earned your place here," Bill replied firmly. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't know you, or this farm, the way I do. Their bond deepened with each passing day. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their lives before they met. Bill told her about his late wife, Sarah, and the joy and heartbreak of raising their children. Lila opened up about her struggles in Chicago, the discrimination she faced, and her dreams of finding a place where she truly belonged. Through these conversations, they discovered common ground. Both had experienced loss, both carried scars from the past, and both yearned for connection. Yet despite the growing closeness between them, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The townspeople hadn't warmed to Lila as quickly as Bill had hoped. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and some shopkeepers treated her with barely concealed disdain. One particularly harsh encounter left her shaken. It happened at the general store. Lila had gone to pick up supplies, a list in hand provided by Bill. As she browsed the aisles, she noticed the other customers glancing at her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. When she approached the counter to pay, Mrs. Henderson, the same nosy shopkeeper who had questioned Bill weeks earlier, eyed her suspiciously. "And what exactly are you doing here?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her tone sharp. "This town doesn't need outsiders stirring up trouble." Lila stiffened, gripping the edge of the counter tightly. She forced herself to remain calm, meeting the older woman's gaze. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said evenly. "I'm here because I care about this place. And about Bill." Mrs. Henderson sniffed dismissively. "We'll see how long that lasts," she muttered under her breath as she rang up the items. By the time Lila returned to the farm, her hands were trembling with anger and hurt. Bill noticed immediately, concern etched across his face. "What happened?" he asked gently. Lila hesitated, unsure if she should burden him with the details, but the frustration bubbling inside her demanded release. "People here don't trust me," she burst out, pacing back and forth. "They act like I'm some kind of threat, like I don't belong. How am I supposed to build a life here when they won't even give me a chance?" Bill sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "I wish I could fix it for you," he said. "But changing minds takes time. All we can do is show them who you really are, the hardworking, kind-hearted person I see every day." "I know," Lila replied, her voice quieter now. "But it's exhausting, Bill. Fighting against their prejudice. It feels like climbing a mountain that never ends." He stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Lila, and you're not climbing alone. We'll face it together, one step at a time." Her anger softened at his words, replaced by a renewed sense of determination. If the townspeople wouldn't accept her, easily then she would have to prove herself in ways they couldn't ignore. Determined to win them over, Lila began brainstorming ideas to contribute to the community. She remembered Bill mentioning that many farmers struggled to sell their produce directly to buyers, relying instead on middlemen who often took a large cut of the profits. What if they could find a way to connect directly with customers? Inspired, she suggested setting up a roadside stand near the entrance of the farm, where locals and travelers alike could purchase fresh produce and homemade goods. At first, Bill was skeptical. "It's a lot of work," he warned. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I'm sure," Lila replied confidently. "If it helps us, and the town, then it's worth it." Together, they built the stand using salvaged wood and painted it a cheerful shade of yellow. Lila baked jars of jam and pickles using recipes she had learned from her mother, filling the air with sweet and tangy scents. On opening day, she arranged baskets of apples, bundles of herbs, and crates of freshly picked vegetables, adding handwritten signs to label each item. To her relief, the stand attracted curious visitors almost immediately. Families stopped by, on their way home from church. Tourists driving through town pulled over to browse, and even a few skeptical neighbors came to investigate. Lila greeted everyone warmly, answering questions and offering samples of her jams. Slowly but surely, word spread about the charming roadside stand run by the new woman in town. Harold Grayson, however, remained unconvinced. A gruff man in his 60s with a penchant for stirring trouble, Harold had been vocal about his disapproval of Bill's choice from the start. He saw Lila's efforts as a threat to tradition, a disruption of the status quo. One afternoon as he drove past the stand, he scowled at the sight of happy customers chatting with Lila. Determined to put an end to what he viewed as nonsense, he marched straight to Bill's house. "You need to rein her in," Harold demanded, pointing an accusatory finger at Bill. "She's turning your farm into some kind of circus." "This isn't what Willow Creek needs." Bill crossed his arms, his expression stern. "Lila is doing exactly what this town needs," he countered. "She's bringing people together, creating opportunities. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine." Harold sputtered, taken aback by Bill's defiance. "Mark my words," he snapped. "This won't end well." "It already has," Bill shot back. "For us, anyway." Frustrated but unable to argue further, Harold stormed off, muttering under his breath. Though his words lingered in Bill's mind, they didn't shake his resolve. If anything, they strengthened his determination to support Lila fully. As autumn settled over Willow Creek, painting the landscape in shades of red and gold, Lila began to feel a shift in the town's attitude. More people visited the roadside stand, some returning weekly to stock up on fresh produce. Children giggled as they sampled her jams, and adults praised her cooking skills. Even Mrs. Henderson begrudgingly admitted that the pickles were not half bad. The roadside stand became more than just a place to sell produce. It became a symbol of hope and resilience. Each morning, Lila woke up before sunrise, her mind buzzing with ideas for new products to offer. She experimented with recipes, creating batches of apple butter, spiced cider, and honey-sweetened granola. Bill helped her gather ingredients from the farm, marveling at how effortlessly she transformed simple things into something extraordinary. Together, they worked side by side, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the countryside. As word spread about the stand, more and more people began stopping by. Some came out of curiosity, others because they heard the food was delicious. Tourists driving through Willow Creek often pulled over, drawn in by the colorful sign and the inviting display of fresh goods. Families started making it a weekend tradition to visit, bringing their children along to pick out treats. Slowly but surely, the stand turned into a hub of activity, a place where strangers became acquaintances, and acquaintances became friends. Despite this growing success, not everyone in town was thrilled. Harold Grayson continued to grumble about Lila's presence, claiming she was ruining the town's character. He wasn't alone in his disapproval. A small group of townsfolk shared his views, whispering behind closed doors about how Lila didn't belong in Willow Creek. They argued that her arrival disrupted the natural order of things, as if change itself was an enemy to be feared. Bill heard the murmurs, saw the glares when he walked into town with Lila by his side. It bothered him. But what bothered him more was the way some people treated her directly. Once, while shopping at the hardware store, he noticed a clerk ignore Lila completely, refusing to answer her questions or even acknowledge her existence. Another time, someone deliberately bumped into her on the sidewalk, muttering something under their breath as they walked away. Lila tried to brush these incidents off, but Bill could see the toll they took on her. Her smiles grew tighter, her shoulders more tense. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, she sat quietly on the porch, staring out at the fields without saying a word. Bill joined her, sensing the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. She hesitated, then sighed. "I thought I could handle it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough." "It's not your fault," Bill said firmly. "You've done everything right. These people, they're just afraid of change, that's all this is." "But how long will it take for them to stop being afraid?" Lila asked, turning to look at him. "How long until they see me as more than just different?" Bill didn't have an answer. Instead, he squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll keep proving them wrong," he said. "Every jar of jam you sell, every smile you give, that's proof." and one day they'll have no choice but to accept you. Though his words were meant to comfort her, Lila knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Acceptance wasn't something that could be forced, it had to be earned, and earning it required patience and perseverance. Still, she resolved to keep going, determined to show the townspeople that she wasn't a threat, she was an asset. In the weeks that followed, Lila doubled down on her efforts to connect with the community. She started attending church services, sitting quietly in the back pew until a few friendly faces invited her to join them afterward for coffee. She volunteered at the local school's annual Harvest Festival, helping organize games and bake sales. When winter approached, she suggested hosting a holiday market at the farm, inviting other farmers and artisans to set up stalls alongside hers. The event drew hundreds of visitors, filling the air with music, laughter, and the smell of roasted chestnuts. These actions didn't go unnoticed. Some of the same people who had once avoided her now greeted her warmly, complimenting her jams, or thanking her for organizing events. Mrs. Henderson, though still wary, stopped making snide comments during transactions at the general store. Even Harold Grayson seemed to soften slightly, though he remained distant and critical. One chilly November afternoon, as Lila restocked the shelves at the roadside stand, a young boy approached her shyly. He held out a crumpled dollar bill, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Can I buy some jam?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Lila smiled warmly, kneeling down so she was eye level with him. "Of course," she said. "Which flavor would you like?" The boy hesitated, scanning the jars lined up neatly on the table. Finally, he pointed to a jar of strawberry rhubarb. "That one looks good," he mumbled. "It's my favorite too," Lila replied, handing him the jar. As she wrapped it carefully, in brown paper she added, "Tell your mom it pairs really well with toast." The boy grinned, clutching the package tightly as he ran back to his mother waiting nearby. Watching him go, Lila felt a surge of pride. Moments like these reminded her why she had come to Willow Creek, to make a difference, however small. Not all encounters were so heartwarming. One evening, as dusk settled over the farm, Bill and Lila were closing up the stand when a pickup truck roared into view, kicking up dust as it skidded to a halt. Harold Grayson stepped out, his face red with anger. Behind him, two men emerged from the truck, their expressions grim. "What do you think you're doing?" Harold demanded, pointing at the stand. "This is private property. You can't just invite strangers onto Bill's land like it's some kind of carnival." Lila stood her ground, her chin lifted defiantly. "This is Bill's decision," she replied calmly, "and if you have a problem with it, you can take it up with him." Harold sneered, stepping closer. "Oh, I plan to," he spat. "You're nothing but trouble, girl. Mark my words, you'll regret coming here." Bill stepped forward, positioning himself between Lila and Harold. His voice was low but firm. "Enough," he said. "You don't speak for me, Harold. This is my farm and Lila is my partner. If you've got a problem with that, then leave. And don't come back." For a moment, Harold looked as though he might argue further. But something in Bill's tone made him hesitate. With a final glare, he turned on his heel and climbed back into his truck, the engine roaring as they sped away. Once they were gone, Lila let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly. Bill wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, leaning into him. "I'm fine," she said. "But I hate feeling like we're always fighting against them." "We're not fighting against them," Bill corrected. "We're building something better, for us and for this town. Don't let Harold get inside your head." Lila managed a small smile, grateful for his unwavering support. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the tension in Willow Creek was far from over. Winter arrived, blanketing the fields in a thick layer of snow. The roadside stand closed for the season, but Lila stayed busy indoors, baking pies and knitting scarves to donate to families in need. Bill admired her determination, her refusal to let negativity dampen her spirit. Together they braved the cold, finding joy in simple pleasures, sipping hot cocoa by the fire, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky, sharing quiet moments of companionship. Through it all, Lila never lost sight of why she had come to Willow Creek. She hadn't expected the journey to be easy, but she also hadn't anticipated the strength she would find within herself, or the love and loyalty Bill offered so freely. Though challenges remained, she knew they could face them together. One snowy evening, as they sat side by side on the couch, Lila rested her head on Bill's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we hadn't met?" she asked softly. Bill chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. "All the time," he admitted. "But then I think about how lucky I am to have found you. No matter what happens next, I know we'll get through it as long as we're together." Lila smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she truly believed she had found a place where she belonged. And, though the road ahead might still hold obstacles, she was ready to face them, one step at a time. Spring arrived in Willow Creek, bringing with it a sense of renewal. The snow melted away, revealing fields ready to be planted and trees budding with new leaves. For Bill and Lila, it was a season of fresh starts, not just for the farm, but for their relationship with the town. Over the past months, they had weathered storms both literal and figurative. While some townsfolk remained skeptical, others had begun to see Lila not as an outsider but as someone who genuinely cared about Willow Creek. The roadside stand reopened on the first warm weekend of April, drawing crowds eager for fresh produce and homemade goods after a long winter. Lila greeted each customer with her usual warmth, offering samples of her latest creations: a tangy lemon curd, rich chocolate fudge, and fragrant lavender honey. Families returned week after week, and soon the stand became a fixture in the foire community. Children begged their parents to stop by, knowing they'd leave with treats tucked into their pockets or bags. Lila's efforts extended beyond the stand. She continued volunteering at local events, organizing bake sales and craft fairs that brought people together. Her quiet determination and kindness slowly chipped away at the walls of prejudice that had once seemed impenetrable. Even Mrs. Henderson, the nosy shopkeeper, began exchanging pleasantries with her during visits to the general store. Though the woman still eyed her suspiciously at times, there was a softening in her tone, a hint that perhaps she was beginning to see Lila differently. But change didn't come without resistance. Harold Grayson remained a constant thorn in their side, stirring trouble whenever he could. He spread rumors about Lila, accusing her of trying to take over the town and turn it into something unrecognizable. Some of his words seeped into the minds of those who were already uneasy about her presence. A few farmers stopped buying supplies from Bill, claiming they didn't want to support someone who associated with outsiders. Others whispered behind closed doors, questioning whether Lila truly belonged in Willow Creek. Bill heard the gossip, saw the subtle shifts in how some neighbors treated him. It stung, but he refused to let it break him or drive a wedge between him and Lila. Instead, he doubled down on his commitment to stand by her side, no matter what challenges arose. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Bill turned to Lila with a thoughtful expression. "I know things haven't been easy," he said, "and I wish I could shield you from all the negativity. But I need you to know, you're worth every bit of this fight." Lila smiled softly, touched by his words. "It's not just your fight," she replied, "it's ours. We're in this together, remember?" Bill nodded, his hand finding hers. "Always." Despite the tension, life on the farm thrived. With Lila's help, Bill introduced new crops to diversify their harvest. Rows of strawberries, sweet corn, and pumpkins stretched across the fields. They experimented with sustainable farming practices, using natural fertilizers and rotating crops to keep the soil healthy. Lila suggested setting up a small greenhouse to grow herbs and vegetables year-round, an idea Bill embraced enthusiastically. Together they worked tirelessly, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Their partnership wasn't limited to physical labor. They also shared dreams for the future. One afternoon, as they took a break under the shade of an old oak tree, Lila pulled out a sketchbook she had been working on. Inside were drawings of plans for the farm, A larger roadside stand, a picnic area for visitors, even a tiny cafe where people could enjoy meals made from fresh ingredients. Bill flipped through the pages, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "These are incredible," he said, looking at her with admiration. "You've thought of everything." "I've been dreaming about it for a while," Lila admitted, blushing slightly. "But I wasn't sure if it was too ambitious." "It's perfect," Bill replied firmly. "Let's make it happen, together." With renewed energy, they began turning Lila's sketches into reality. Bill hired a carpenter to build a bigger stand, complete with shelves for displaying goods and a counter for serving snacks. They planted flowers around the perimeter, adding color and charm to the space. Neighbors who had once been hesitant to engage with Lila now pitched in, offering advice or lending a hand. Slowly but surely, the project brought the community closer, uniting them in a shared goal. Harold Grayson, however, was far from pleased. As the revamped stand opened to rave reviews, he grew increasingly bitter. He saw it as a direct challenge to his authority, a sign that Willow Creek was changing in ways he couldn't control. One Saturday morning, as families gathered at the stand to pick up fresh produce, Harold stormed onto the property, his face flushed with anger. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded, gesturing wildly at the bustling crowd. "You're ruining our way of life. This isn't a carnival, it's a farm." Lila stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "This is a farm," she said, "and we're celebrating what makes it special. If you don't like it, that's fine, but don't try to tell us what we can and can't do." Harold sputtered, pointing a finger at her. "You're nothing but trouble, girl. You'll regret coming here." Before Lila could respond, Bill moved to stand beside her. "That's enough, Harold," he said, his tone icy. "You don't speak for this town, or for me. Now get off my property before I call the sheriff." For a moment, Harold glared at them, his jaw clenched tightly. Then with a huff, he turned and stalked back to his truck, slamming the door as he drove away. Once he was gone, Lila exhaled deeply, her hands trembling slightly. Bill placed a reassuring arm around her shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine," she said, "but I hate feeling like we're always fighting against him." "We're not fighting against him," Bill corrected. "We're building something better, for us and for everyone else. Don't let him win by letting him get inside your head." Lila leaned into him, drawing strength from his words. Though Harold's hostility lingered in the air, she refused to let it overshadow the progress they had made. As summer approached, the farm flourished. Visitors came from neighboring towns to experience the charm of the roadside stand and its surrounding attractions. Children played in the grass, couples enjoyed picnics under the trees, and elderly residents reminisced about simpler times. Lila's cafe idea became a reality, serving sandwiches, pies, and cold drinks made from ingredients grown right on the farm. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, drawing smiles from everyone who passed by. Even some of Harold's allies began to soften. One afternoon, as Lila served slices of peach pie to a group of women, one of them, a stern-looking woman named Edna, spoke up. "You know," she said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "this place has really brought the town together. I never thought I'd say it, but thank you." Lila blinked in surprise, then smiled warmly. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she replied. "That's all I ever wanted." Edna nodded, her expression softening. "Well, you've earned it." Moments like these reminded Lila why she had stayed in Willow Creek. Despite the challenges, she had found a sense of belonging, a community that, while imperfect, was learning to embrace her as one of their own. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the fields, Bill and Lila stood side by side, surveying the land they had worked so hard to transform. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and music from a nearby gathering, a testament to the connections they had forged. "You've done amazing things here," Bill said, turning to Lila with pride in his eyes. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "And I couldn't have done it without you," Lila replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "This place feels like home now, like it always was meant to be." Bill kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "It is home," he said. "For both of us." As they stood together, surrounded by the beauty of the farm and the promise of a brighter future, Layla felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead might still hold challenges, but she knew they could face them, together. For the first time in her life, she truly believed she had found her place in the world. The months passed quickly, and Willow Creek transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The farm became the heart of the town, a place where people gathered to celebrate, connect, and find comfort. Lila's vision had turned into reality. A vibrant roadside stand surrounded by picnic tables, flower gardens, and a cozy cafe that served meals made with love. Families came from miles away to visit, drawn not just by the fresh produce but by the warmth and hospitality they found there. Harold Grayson still grumbled about the changes, but his voice grew quieter over time. Fewer people listened to his complaints, and those who did often rolled their eyes or changed the subject. Even Harold's closest allies began to drift away, tired of his negativity. One day he packed up his truck and moved to another town, leaving behind only whispers of his disapproval. Without him stirring trouble, the tension in Willow Creek eased significantly. Lila noticed the shift immediately. Neighbors who had once avoided her now greeted her warmly, inviting her to community events and asking for her advice on baking or gardening. Children ran up to her at the stand, eager to share stories or show off drawings they had made. She even started teaching cooking classes at the local school, sharing recipes and tips with students who were fascinated by her creativity. For Bill, seeing Lila embraced by the town filled him with pride. He had always known she was special, but watching others recognize it too was deeply satisfying. Together they worked tirelessly to keep the farm thriving, their partnership stronger than ever. They laughed together during long days in the fields, shared quiet moments under the stars, and dreamed of even bigger projects for the future. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled around them, Bill surprised Lila with an idea. "What? Do you think about hosting a harvest festival here?" he asked, gesturing toward the fields. "We could invite everyone, farmers, families, tourists. It'd be a way to celebrate all we've built together." Lila's eyes lit up with excitement. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "We could have games, music, food, maybe even a pumpkin carving contest." They spent weeks preparing for the event, working side by side to ensure every detail was perfect. Bill built hay bales for seating, while Lila decorated the area with strings of lights and colorful banners. Volunteers from the town pitched in, setting up booths and organizing activities. By the time the festival arrived, the farm looked like something out of a storybook, a magical place brimming with life and joy. On the day of the festival, the turnout exceeded their expectations. Hundreds of people poured onto the property, filling the air with laughter and chatter. Children played tug-of-war and raced through obstacle courses, while adults browsed craft stalls and sampled dishes from the cafe. A band played lively tunes, on a makeshift stage, drawing couples onto the dance floor. Everywhere you looked, smiles abounded. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Bill took Lila's hand and led her to the center of the crowd. He cleared his throat, signaling for everyone's attention. When the noise died down, he spoke, his voice steady and heartfelt. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "This farm has been my home for most of my life, but it wasn't until Lila came into my life that I realized what it was missing: community, connection, and love." He paused, turning to look at her. "Lila has brought so much goodness to this place, and to me. She's shown us all what it means to persevere, to care, and to dream big. So tonight I want to ask her something important." Reaching into his pocket, Bill pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple yet beautiful ring. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he got down on one knee. "Lila Monroe," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Lila's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. The crowd erupted in cheers, clapping and whistling as Bill slipped the ring onto her finger. Overwhelmed with emotion, Lila threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. For a moment, everything else faded away. The challenges, the doubts, the struggles. All that mattered was the love they shared. In the weeks that followed, preparations, for the wedding brought the town even closer together. Everyone wanted to help, offering gifts, favors, and assistance wherever needed. Mrs. Henderson volunteered to bake the cake, insisting it would be the best anyone had ever tasted. Edna organized the decorations, hanging garlands of flowers and ribbons throughout the barn where the ceremony would take place. Even the children pitched in, gathering wildflowers to create bouquets and centerpieces. On the day of the wedding, the farm was transformed into a scene of pure magic. Lanterns glowed softly in the twilight, casting a warm light over the fields. Tables were set with checkered cloths and mason jars filled with candles. Friends and neighbors filled the seats, their faces glowing with anticipation. As the music began, Lila walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress adorned with lace, her dark curls framing her radiant face. Bill stood at the front, his eyes shining with tears as he watched her approach. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, filled with promises of love, support, and partnership. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted, in applause, cheering loudly as Bill kissed Lila tenderly. Afterward, they danced beneath the stars, surrounded by the people who had become their family. Life after the wedding continued to flourish. The farm thrived, its success inspiring others in Willow Creek to embrace innovation and collaboration. Lila's cafe expanded, adding outdoor seating and hosting weekend markets that attracted visitors from neighboring towns. Bill and Lila's greenhouse project grew into a full-fledged initiative, providing fresh produce year-round and creating jobs for locals. Though challenges occasionally arose, they faced them together, their bond unshakable. Lila continued to teach cooking classes, sharing her passion for food with anyone willing to learn. Bill mentored young farmers, passing on the wisdom he had gained over decades of hard work. Together, they built a legacy, not just of prosperity, but of kindness, resilience, and unity. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lila rested her head on Bill's shoulder. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked softly. Bill chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. "How could I forget? You were brave enough to take a chance on me, and on this town. And you believed in me when no one else did," Lila replied, smiling. "I'm so glad I came here." "Me too," Bill said, kissing the top of her head. "You've made this place, and my life, better than I ever imagined." As they gazed out at the fields bathed in golden light, they felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had faced rejection, prejudice, and doubt, but they had also found acceptance, love, and purpose. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. Together they looked toward the future, knowing they had built something beautiful, not just a farm, but a life rooted in love, acceptance, and resilience. And as the seasons changed, bringing new opportunities and challenges, they faced them hand in hand, ready to write the next chapter of their story.